Hey everybody, my name is Nate Evans. I'm the Senior Manager of the Digital Experience team in MSUIT and the Digital Accessibility Coordinator for Michigan State University. Really excited to be here. This has been a fantastic conference and seen lots of good sessions so far. What drew me into digital accessibility work, I was actually working as an instructional designer at Michigan State University. It's kind of how I got my start, and I had the opportunity to join the accessibility team, 9 years ago now, and have just kind of been able to build the team over time and really enjoyed the experience. In terms of digital accessibility at Michigan State University, we have a web accessibility policy. It's owned by our Office of the General Counsel, enforced by our ADA Coordinator's Office, and resourced and supported by my office within MSUIT, as well as the many other colleges and departments on our campus. In terms of our team, we go by DigitalX, and our team exists to help students, faculty, and staff create great digital experiences that are accessible for everyone. Our team is about 6 years old. It's positioned within academic technology, although we are a central service unit to the entire campus. We've started with a team of one. Hi, my name's Nate. Good to meet you. It's grown to 8 FTEs today. We're made up of accessibility specialists, analysts, instructional designers, solutions engineers, media producers. We're very cross-functional in nature, and we scale our services by hiring on more and more students and then training and mentoring them up to help support our services essentially in IT. It's been an awesome experience. In fact, this summer, I'll talk more about it later, but one of the opportunities we had, we hired about 100 students to work in our office to support some closed captioning work, all remotely. In terms of our services to campus, we offer services in 3 major areas. The first is in accessibility review related to procurement. So somebody says, hey, I want to buy something. We help do some review related to that. We also help do creative design and production. So for folks who want to create digital goods, we help them build those accessibly. And then the last area is an accessibility review of existing goods. So, I want to make sure that this thing I've already built is accessible or make it more accessible. Can you help me out? So those are the main areas that we work out of. Our goal is to work really closely alongside our campus partners to improve strategy and improve our campus-wide culture and shift that culture more towards digital access and inclusion. One of the ways that we accomplish this is through our strong liaison network. So we've got over 125 web accessibility liaisons on our campus. So the way we're structured, every one of our colleges and departments, there's 42 of them. Every one of them has at least one web accessibility liaison. They're kind of the local main point of contact, the local expert. Although I will say, I got to give them a shout out because I saw a few of them in the chat earlier. Liaison is not the best word. They are the campus rock stars. To steal a Instagram term, they might be the local influencer, really, because they're the ones that really understand their college or department. They speak the local language. They know the structure, the culture a lot better than I do. And so our goal is to help resource them and make them successful in their work. In terms of our structure and how we do compliance, we're using a 5-year plan at Michigan State University. So every college and department submits an annual self-assessment that says, hey, look, here's kind of how we're progressing. Here's the goals we set for ourselves this year, and here's how we're improving. And we ask them to respond in 5 key areas, which include culture, training, web accessibility, course accessibility, and procurement. So anyway, really excited to be here and join my awesome colleagues here.
Thank you, Nate. Pat, will you go next, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Pat Kogos. I am the Director of Digital Accessibility at University of Chicago. The Center for Digital Accessibility has been at UChicago for a little over a year now. So we launched in January of 2020. So it's been, as you can guess, kind of a crazy year. I've been in IT my whole life, started off as a developer and then came up through that side of things, but then at one point became a web content owner and realized all of a sudden that there was this thing called accessibility that applied to websites. And it was a real revelation for me because I had spent really my adult life as a volunteer in the world of the visually impaired. So didn't even realize that that was something that needed to be considered. So it was a great way to bring together my philanthropic passions with my work. And so just started to learn more about it on my own, and everyone can do that. There are so many great resources out there. And we always just tell people not to be intimidated. It's just important to get started. So that's kind of how I came to it. And one of the things that always impressed me in my work with people who are visually impaired is a lot of the work I did was with children, and they're so impressive, the things they can do if you don't put barriers in front of them. So, you know, they would tandem bike with a sighted user. They would go kayaking. You know, there are so many, they're limitless. And I didn't want anyone to feel limited because we had created something electronic that they couldn't access. And in the world of higher education, as we all know, there's so many great assets, so many important opportunities for learning, and everyone needs to be included. So anyway, circled together my passion with my work, and I'm really happy to be here. The Center for Digital Accessibility has, we're a team of 4. It's myself. We have 2 people who came from the web dev side of things and are really fantastic accessibility advocates. They're just fantastic. And we have 1 person who comes from more of the accessible technology side of things. But the whole team is really well-rounded, very passionate about what we do, really wanting to make a difference in the university community. We are situated inside the Academic Technology Solutions team, which sits inside of our central IT services. So that's where we are positioned within the university. There were a lot of initiatives going on from a grassroots effort within UChicago for many years, but it didn't all really solidify and become policy and become this Center for Digital Accessibility until, as I said, a year ago. So we, have a lot of work to do for training purposes and just awareness and whatnot. But, again, I think we'll touch on some of those other things a little bit later. Wanting to make sure that everyone realizes it's part of our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, that it's a really important part of making sure everyone is included. So there's a lot to be done on that front of things as well. So I'm happy to be here. We have spent a lot of time doing some assessments, getting all of our processes in place, testing. We do some testing of vended products. We also do a lot of testing of websites and web content, and just, again, trying to raise awareness about, because some of it is just, it's not that people are intentionally creating things that are not accessible, but they don't know what the standards are and they don't know what the guidelines are. So I'm really trying to ramp up our training efforts so that we can get the community up to speed on where they need to be. So anyway, thanks for the invitation to be here today to DQ. And great again to see Nate and Charlie. And thanks, Cyndi, for moderating.
Thank you, Pat. Charles, your turn to take it away.
Hi, everybody. Charlie Collick from Rutgers University. My official title is Associate Director of Instructional Technology and IT Accessibility. It's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially it's my 2 worlds colliding. My office sits under the Office of Information Technology. So like Pat, we are central to the university, which presents its pros and cons. And I'm sure we'll discuss some of those today. How I ended up in accessibility is a pretty interesting story, and it's not unsimilar to Nate's. And it's funny that that's the case, because I often say that within the Big Ten, we borrow a lot of our accessibility resources and initiatives from Michigan State University. So it's not too far off that I would be in a similar position as Nate. But I also came out of the instructional design field. In 2015, 2016, I was just wrapping up my master's degree in user experience design. And at that time, the instructional design office that I was working out of was being merged into what is now our Teaching and Learning with Technology Center. And I was at a bit of a crossroads. I had gotten some exposure to accessibility through the universal design work that I was doing as an instructional designer, as well as through the master's degree program. And we had just been contacted by the Office for Civil Rights about a accessibility complaint that was filed against us for some web accessibility issues. And at that time, I was getting ready to make my way over to the Teaching and Learning with Technology Center. And I was asked if I would be interested in staying behind in OIT to spin up the IT accessibility initiative. So given the background in instructional design, my connection to a lot of our academic units, as well as that the experience that I gained from my user experience design concentration in my master's degree, I decided to give it a shot. I knew how important accessibility was, and although I was not a technical expert from an accessibility standpoint, I brought a lot of the sort of local knowledge, the institutional knowledge, as well as the project management experience to the table. So the first thing that I had to do was to find people who knew what the heck they were doing and create a team. At the time, we only had one true accessibility expert, and that was an individual who was embedded in the instructional design team. So it was mostly from that position of course content, making sure that PowerPoint slides were accessible, that course shells were accessible. We really had nobody that understood just the sort of scope and breadth of web accessibility, procurement accessibility, communication accessibility. So I first and foremost needed to spin up a proposal for what sort of resources we would need. And we'll talk a little bit about this later on when we talk about securing funding. But the model that we ended up coming up with, because there was just so much to work on, was that we positioned ourselves as internal consultants. And so our accessibility team will serve on a variety of projects, whether it's creating an accessibility review process within our procurement pathways, working with our instructional designers to create accessible programming for faculty, and then also our Office of Disability Services and our compliance officers to work directly with students and staff as situations come up where barriers are identified or accommodations are requested. So, you know, it's a multi-pronged approach, but the thing that's been most important about the work that we're doing is we're trying to build accessibility as local and as close to the ground as possible. We don't want to be viewed as an office that will do the remediation work for you. So we're not somebody to come to say, hey, can you make this system or this application or this website accessible for us? We'll provide them with the tools, we'll provide them with the training as well as the support to do it themselves. And obviously that meets a bit of resistance starting off, but I think that over time, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, people have really started to latch on to that model. And we've seen a lot of people become, as Nate was referring to them earlier, as local influencers, folks that can really be that local contact person for accessibility.
Great, thanks, Charlie. So the Q&A has a few questions, and we have a few questions that we were going to answer and then open it up for you all to ask questions. But I think some of these are interplaying with what we were going to talk about. So we have structured this to ask our next question about COVID-19, the pandemic. So how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted your accessibility programs? And then from the Q&A, I wanted to tie this into how have you handled legacy applications? The comment here from Chris, at our university, there's still thousands of pages dating back to the early days of the internet, up through to when digital accessibility started being taken seriously. So I think then if you could tie that into pandemic response, if that's had a tie-in for you all with legacy applications and the work that maybe you transitioned into doing. So actually, Charlie, will you take this first?
Sure.
And then we'll pass it on. Thanks.
Absolutely. Charlie here from Rutgers again. So in terms of what changed with the onset of COVID, our team at the time was really working on staff and faculty training programs when COVID hit. So our attention immediately shifted away from those sort of required training programs and immediately jumped into evaluating new technologies that were being brought in because of the pandemic. So we brought in Zoom, we already had WebEx. We immediately found out that our convocation and our graduation ceremonies were going to be remote. And so we wanted to make sure that we had somebody available to help vet those products prior to implementation to ensure that we were offering up accessible solutions. So that was the way that things first shifted. almost immediately our training and requests for sort of one-off trainings or consultations skyrocketed. In the fall of 2019, we had about, I want to say it was under 100 participants for the full semester in our wide variety of accessibility trainings that we offer. And then from January of that year, I should say February of that year, of COVID through to the end of July, we had over 500 registrants for our training. So it just grew astronomically. People started to become aware of accessibility and how it impacted their jobs and their constituents. So that was great. Now, in terms of the second question, how are we handling those legacy applications? Because of course, our attention focused to the new stuff, right? Like what is being brought in for instruction? Well, what about all that hasn't been touched? And that's a great question. Our first priority was to, I hate this term, but to stop the bleeding. So we wanted to make sure that we got hooked in with procurement to make sure we were checking things that were new. But at the same time, we've taken a unit-based evaluation process where we'll go in and we'll essentially do some training and audit a unit, a business unit. So any of their digital properties, whether it's a website or the PDFs that are on that website, the systems that they support or that they own, the applications that they use internally, and we'll give them sort of an understanding of what their level of accessibility is. And so this could include new systems and software that they're implementing, or things that have been laying around for a while that may not even be in use anymore, but are wildly inaccessible. And that approach has gained some traction because, once again, it requires folks to be accountable for what they own, and at the same time, we don't know what they have. Right? They understand their inventory better than we do. So we provide them with the tools, the resources, and the support to make all of that content accessible in the priority order that they deem to be appropriate.
Great, thanks. Nate, how about your campus at Michigan State? How have you responded to the pandemic, and then legacy applications for you guys?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the challenges that our CIO brought to us back in March, she said, look, I kind of see a couple things emerging here. You've got the challenge of we're going to have to make our courses available virtually, which we're at MSU primarily a residential campus. We do offer online programs, but that was going to be a shift for maybe most of our faculty members. And then on the other hand, you have the student impact. There's a lot of students that are typically employed, by our campus, and they have campus jobs. They're working at Sparties, or they're working, at basketball games or wherever on campus. And we could see that this was going to be an impact to them financially. And so she said, how can we solve this? Like, how is there something that we could do that kind of maybe helps with both challenges? And one of the things we came up with in April was our MSU crowdsourced closed captioning program. And so, as I mentioned before, we hired a lot of students. We hired 100 of them, and we hired them all remotely. And so much help from DigitalX staff, as well as our HR, IT staff, and getting those students hired. But essentially, the idea is we used a machine closed caption that would go through and caption those, but we know the quality of that caption is subpar in a lot of cases, just through the AI machine captioning. And so the system that we use, they were able to edit the captions and then improve them over time. And so faculty would submit those captions for closed captioning, or excuse me, their video content for closed captioning. Students would go in and make it better over time. And to date, we're still running that program. We have less students involved with it, but just by some of the numbers, I've still blown away reading some of these things. But the number of students we have involved right now in this program, between paid and volunteer, 56 students. The total MSU closed captions that have been corrected to date, the number of pieces of media is just over 13,000 pieces of individual content. 132,409 minutes. I checked it this morning. I still can't believe that there are that many minutes of teaching and learning content that now are improved for accessibility, which is great. Our effective rate per minute, you all know kind of what the prices are and what the competition is like. And, overall, this is not the cheapest option, but it was an option that helped support our students in a time that they needed it. It supports our faculty who are maybe not used to closed captioning, but we need to offer them a paid resource to do that. So our rate per minute is $2.59, which is pretty great, I think. And then we've had a number of full-time staff pulled from the scoring office and other areas of academic technology, people who have just pitched in to help, and a little over 3,000 hours of full-time staff time that have focused on that. So that's a big success story, I think, for us at Michigan State, and just one of the things that we're trying to do to kind of get through this pandemic. In terms of the legacy apps question, I don't know that any of it has been driven by the pandemic specifically. Those legacy apps that we had are still there, and like Charlie said, we're using a priority-based approach to try to prioritize what's the biggest impact in terms of impact to our students and faculty, and then trying to prioritize and do testing on those to make sure we can shore those up and make them more accessible.
Thanks, Nate. Pat, what about the University of Chicago?
So at University of Chicago, I would say the pandemic affected us in an interesting way because we did not have a lot of online programs prior to the pandemic. So everything flipped online. It was a real steep process for us, but I think the university and Academic Technology Solutions did a really great job in making that flip. There's always some road bumps, but I think one of the things it did is really provide a strong focus on the digital world, and it really raised the bar that all of a sudden a lot of people were looking at digital accessibility when they might not have been paying as much attention to it before. So I think it really moved the lens and in a very good way, gave it a lot of additional focus. I think it was challenging for my team and I because we came into existence in January, and then, the pandemic came around in March. So we were basically creating a new unit remotely. But again, there've been a lot of great tools that have helped us do that. We've had support from the university financially, as far as, the center being spun up, the funding of tools and whatnot. And so I think there've been a lot of pros, as far as raised heightened awareness for digital accessibility, but also cons because it's just kind of difficult to get in the groove of working remotely and trying to be as efficient as you might want to be. But ultimately, I don't think it has made our team suffer or the effort suffer at all. If anything, I think it gave everyone a renewed commitment to it. So that's been great. As far as legacy assets, again, I agree with both Nate and Charlie. Everybody has those. There's lots of stuff out there. You really do have to put some sort of priorities on them. If anything can be sunset, do it. If anything doesn't need to be out there anymore, please look at retiring it. But things that have very high visibility, things that are student facing, things that are essential for anyone's work, any kind of work, their research work, the staff work, anything that's essential really is a higher priority than some of the things that have lower usage or less visibility. So I think we're kind of all on the same page with the priority thing for sure.
Thanks, Pat. That leads us into our next question about how do you secure budget for accessibility and where does this funding come from? Each of you have mentioned a little bit about this. There was a question in the Q&A about, are there suggestions from the panel on how to go about building this type of accessibility team for a university that does not currently have this type of central department? And I think we're all sort of in this decentralized nature. So Nate, how about MSU?
Sure. I think the answer to that question is it depends. It depends on kind of your current context at any given moment. I love that line from Glenn Gary Glenn Ross, that always be selling, which I hate saying that about accessibility, but this idea of like storytelling, always telling the stories of success, the things that are going really well, that's important. That is so important. That's one of my early regrets as I got involved with this work is I wasn't focused enough. And I think, yeah, just not focused enough on storytelling. And talking about the good things, the benefits that a diverse, culture can bring to your organization. So that would be one thing. And then in terms of, my first answer around depends. It's really about a number of different factors, right? Where's the momentum within your institution right now? For us at Michigan State, there's a big emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Accessibility is a part of that movement. And so there's, leadership is a big part of making that funding available, right? So, if you have leadership in different areas of your institution that are focused on those initiatives at any given time, those are good partners that you want to be working with. So yeah, it really depends at, any given moment, how you tell your story and who you should be partnering with at every given time, but never stop. I think that's kind of one of the takeaways that I've learned over the last few years.
Yeah, thanks. Charlie, how about Rutgers?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd echo what Nate said, plus 1,000, right? In terms of the evangelization of accessibility. You have to get out there and you have to be speaking about it. And I would really say emphasize the carrot as opposed to the stick. Talk about the positives as opposed to the negative repercussions that could come if they don't do it. I feel that people respond better to that. And you really have to start with the why before you get to the cash, right? So I would say align yourself with your organization's mission, vision, and values. Nate already mentioned DEI. It's big on our campus right now too. So we've tried to show the alignment between what we're doing and some of those initiatives. We've had a couple others like One IT. So there's been this sort of push for consolidation of technology. And so we make sure that accessibility is a part of that conversation when choosing the single solutions, as well as improving the overall student experience. And I think all of us on this call can agree, the more we focus on, bringing in accessible technologies, the better off our students will be. The two other things that I'll recommend is attach to projects early on. It's all about being in the know and knowing what's coming down the pike, especially with the onset of COVID and how rapidly things moved. We wanted to be a part of those early conversations to make sure that accessibility was being tended to. And the final one, not to quote one of my favorite leaders, is get in trouble, get in good trouble, right? John Lewis, get out there and make waves. When you see something that's not right, say something. And that's one of the things that I think my team does really well. It doesn't matter the person's title at the university. If they see something, a video gets pushed out that's not captioned, or transcripts aren't being provided for a podcast, they'll go ahead and tweet at them. And I love that, because I'll never reprimand my staff for standing up for what's right.
Thanks, Pat. Can you think of a specific campaign or something that the University of Chicago has done really well tied into your accessibility budget, but how to sort of build on the culture of accessibility and promoting that?
So the budget thing is always going to be tricky, and particularly this year with the hit that institutions of higher education have taken to the overall budget. It's been a really challenging year for everybody, but it continues to be a big focus for us. So the fact that we had leadership buy-in, as we've talked about before, is really crucial. It was communicated from the top that digital accessibility was important, and that everyone needed to learn what it meant and to engage. And that was really important. So the budget part of it is going to be different for everybody. We're a very decentralized university. I think a lot of universities operate that way. So there is some central funding provided. Of course, the creation of our center cost money. We've got 4 FTEs, plus the tools required to offer to the university community. That all costs money. That was all centrally funded. But a lot of the work that goes on beyond that, a lot of the units will absorb themselves. And part of it is a change in the way we look at budgeting, and knowing that accessibility is as important to your events, to your online presence, to everything that you have to do, so that you do build that into your budget. And it's going to take some time to figure out what is that number, like how do we budget for that? It's not something we instinctively know. And so I think, again, it will be different for everyone based upon how much content they have, how much video they have, all the things that make each unit very individual is going to impact their budget in a very different way. So I think we had great central support for this. It was communicated well and funded. But again, there will be unit budget considerations that I think will evolve for some time.
Yeah, thanks, Pat.
Sure.
The next question revolves around, are you part of a consortium that can buy technology and enterprise level services with sort of a group buying power? And for maybe smaller institutions than some of our universities, there's different challenges along with that when we're talking about budgets. And Pat, you mentioned a really good thing about altering how we think about budgets related to accessibility and coming from top down and bottom up at the same time. And there's also kind of tied to this one about the consortium is a question from the Q&A about reviewing or auditing websites for accessibility. Is there a tool, a document, or other mechanism used to document the results and report those results back to the content owner? And if you would be willing to share. So if you could talk about that at each of your universities, and Pat, we'll start with you this time. So is University of Chicago part of a consortium? And then what do you use for reviewing and auditing websites?
So we are part of several consortiums. I don't know how much consolidated buying we do. I would say it's more information sharing and process sharing, which has really been super helpful. We're in a couple different consortiums, and I really have valued my time with my colleagues in those spaces. We have not really got into any consolidated buying as a result of that, though. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second part, Cyndi?
Second part is, when reviewing or auditing websites for accessibility, what do you use? Is there a tool, a document, or other mechanism? And how do you share that back to content owners?
Yeah, so for a while, when we first got started, we were using a lot of the free tools that are out there. There's a lot of free browser plugins out there. And, but then we did acquire an enterprise accessibility tool for our websites, and that provided us with a more robust reporting thing. I think as far as courses, we use Canvas as our LMS. So there's some accessibility features within Canvas as well. We don't have a bigger, broader reporting enterprise tool in place in that space, but for the website stuff we do, and we make that available as part of our services to the university community. So that's one of the things that we manage as our team.
Great, thanks. Charlie, for Rutgers, are you part of a consortium? And then what do you use to review and audit websites?
Absolutely. So Charlie here from Rutgers. We are part of several consortiums, the Big Ten Academic Alliance, as well as Unizin, and then some smaller local consortiums like NJ Edge. And they've been instrumental in terms of helping us build a foundation for accessibility at the university. As I mentioned before, we often quote unquote borrow, even though I don't plan on returning it, to folks like Nate over at MSU or some of our other Big Ten peers. We borrow all sorts of artifacts from their processes and try to design a solution that works for us here at Rutgers based on our structure, based on our sort of politics and things of that nature. That is much more impactful to us than sort of the unified buying power. Now, when it comes to consortiums like Unizin that are based around that, having accessibility as a high priority is certainly a good thing, because we know all of the solutions and the services that we're getting from those consortiums are accessibility at least being minded. I would also say don't discount local relationships. So they don't have to be a part of some sort of official consortium, but all of you have local sort of organizations, whether they're other universities or community college and things of that nature, that are dealing with a lot of the same issues that you are. And so bringing those folks together and sharing resources is extremely helpful. Now, switching over to the second part of the question about reviewing and auditing websites, we do use a suite of tools for web accessibility, given that that's where the OCR complaint, the original complaint that got our initiative started, hit. We are much more resourced in that particular area. And we provide those tools directly to the site owners, so they do their own reporting. And then when we have a live audit group like we did for the OCR resolution agreement, they report those results back to us. So they show us how they're remediating their sites over time. Where we do provide sort of documents and templates for defect reports is in the area of procurement. So we don't do exhaustive evaluations of the things that are being purchased, but we will do spot checks where we'll provide just a simple overview of what the defects are and provide those back to the internal purchasers as well as the vendors. And then, yes, we would be happy to share all that.
Great, thank you. Nate, Michigan State University.
Yeah.
Consortium, yes, no?
Echoing, the same things Pat and Charlie mentioned. We participate in the Big Ten Academic Alliance and EDUCAUSE, a few other consortiums. I actually co-chair the IT accessibility group for the Big Ten Academic Alliance, so super excited to be with friends on this call. And yeah, we have a lot of conversations around what does it look like for us to potentially, we're all interested in a product. Could we consortially purchase it? It gets difficult because in the IT space, particularly, even in where you have R1 institutions that are similar in size and mission vision, the diversity of the products we buy is still fairly high. So consortial buying can be difficult, but we're having a lot of conversations around how can we share accessibility auditing and review resources in terms of, hey, the number of weeks that go by, it feels like almost every week somebody's saying, hey, is somebody buying this product? Can we share the review on that? At least could I take a look before we jump in and do it ourselves? So that's definitely one of the benefits of working across the consortium. One of the things that I would be remiss not to mention, even though it's not related to our IT accessibility group in the Big Ten, but the Big Ten Libraries Group is knocking it out of the park in terms of e-resource accessibility on their databases. They share those publicly. I'd highly recommend stop what you're doing, go do a quick Goog on e-resource Big Ten Academic Alliance accessibility because they're doing some fantastic work over there. In terms of what was the second question? Auditing websites for accessibility. Yeah, we're doing a couple different things. On the academic side, we just started using a tool called Blackboard Ally. It is not, we don't use Blackboard as our LMS, but that's been a really great tool for helping our educators develop and understand where there are accessibility problems within their coursework, and then how to chart plans for success over time. We're in our first year of using that, and so that's been a helpful tool. On the website, we have a new initiative that we're starting in the second quarter of this year, where we're going to be focusing on web auditing of our digital properties. So yeah, more to come on that soon, but yeah, we're using mostly manual inspection on our websites at this time.
Great. So we have just a little over 10 minutes, and I'd like to address some of the questions directly from the Q&A. There are several that involve faculty and the disconnect sometimes between faculty creating accessible content. And we've talked about LMSs or learning management systems. So what tactics do you engage with faculty? Maybe if you have an example of a tool or a resource that you've developed to help understand the importance of accessibility on your campuses. Charlie, do you want to jump in?
Sure. So from a technology standpoint, we also use Ally, as Nate just mentioned. We are in the process of rolling that out. Before that, we were using UDoIt, which was an accessibility tool inside of Canvas. We have a really strong partnership with our teaching and learning with technology groups, and that is plural. We have multiple teaching and learning with technology groups around Canvas. And so it's really important that we have those strong relationships, because those are our conduits to the faculty. So where we can, we try and integrate accessibility into conversations about pedagogy and course design and course review processes, as well as any sort of for a while there, we were offering grants to faculty on for developing fully online courses, and passing accessibility checks were a part of that grant. So we've tried different tactics along those lines. In terms of really getting down to the brass tacks with faculty and why this is important and why they should prioritize this over some of all the other things that they're responsible for, it goes back to what both Nate and Pat have said, and it's storytelling, right? It's trying to create empathy for the end users, and that's all users, because we know that the more accessible a course is, the better it is for all of our students. I myself do not have any hearing impairment, but I use captions on nearly every video that I watch. Things like that really go a long way, because it gets the faculty out of the sort of mindset, like, I'll need to address this if there's someone in my class that requires an accommodation, and they start thinking about it prior to launching their courses. So that's where we're going with it right now.
All right, Pat, how about you?
Well, since the Center for Digital Accessibility is within the Academic Technology Solutions team, we're on the same team as the Learning Design team, who has direct contact with faculty on a regular basis. So I would say that that's, we've created a digital accessibility lead on the Learning Design team, and he advocates he's the go-between between the Center for Digital Accessibility and the LDT. And so he's been able to keep an eye out for, like, as they're creating training sessions, make sure accessibility is a part of it. We've also created some specialized training, for instance, like how to set up a live captioner in your Zoom meeting if you have a student with an accommodation. So we've created some very specific training modules that people can consume either synchronously or asynchronously. And so we've tried to get into the mix with the Learning Design team so that we can stay engaged with faculty. And I would say that that's really been great. They've, helping to know what those checks are with the Canvas accessibility checker, so that you can check your course, helping to understand just what basic content creator accessibility guidelines are. And again, with the communication from the provost this year regarding our new policy and our new center, that there was a strong focus, I would say, across the community, including with faculty members.
So each of you have talked about storytelling and how important that is to build awareness. And can you share with us an example of maybe you or someone on your team has talked to a campus leader and had to convince them that you needed some budget, or something needed budget that wasn't being allocated, and how you might do that? And if you haven't done that, how would you do that? So Nate, I'll pick on you first.
Put me on the spot, will you? I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'll go back to my previous answer. Sometimes it depends. Like, you need to know your leadership and know what works for them. Some CIOs we've had in the past are very data driven. And in those cases, it's all about pulling the right metrics and then telling a story against those metrics to help convince them that this is valuable. Other times it's more about the emotional appeal, more about the impact to students. And so those are the times that you need to have your ear to the ground and listen for stories that are happening within your colleges and departments of success. So I can't think of a specific question or example off the top of my head, but I guess the last thing I would say is don't give up. There are so many times where I found myself where I just got to get more at bats. Sometimes you strike out and that doesn't mean it's over. You have to play the long game with some of this stuff, and you have to keep asking and keep asking, and then learning, did that come across right? Should I have presented that information differently? How can I convince this group of people that this is valuable and needed? So never give up. Keep at it, because yeah, over time you end up being able to stick with the baseball metaphor here. You'll hit a home run.
Well, it is spring training for baseball, so that's a very timely metaphor there. Pat, do you have some input on this?
Well, one of the things I wanted to just bring up about budget, since we're back in that conversation again, is that there are so many things you can do that don't cost money. So we're always trying to just raise awareness on that too. Not everything's going to have a budget impact. If you're your content owner and you're just missing, let's say, alt text on your images, that's not really going to cost you anything. You just need to know that that's necessary, learn how to do it, and then put it into action. There are lots of different things that can be done at the content creator level that don't cost anything. There are also some very low cost things that can be done to, like, your entire website. If your link style is bad, for instance, and there's just one change you can make that impacts your entire site. So we try, as challenging as everyone's budgets are, we try to just raise awareness that there are so many things to do, including free tools, free color contrast checkers, free browser plugins, lots and lots of free things you can make use of out there. Lots of webinars that are free, that are posted online. We've got tons of resources on our website, and just don't want anyone to use a lack of budget as an excuse not to move that accessibility needle, because it's really critical work. I know we all believe in it, and just don't be intimidated to get started with the small things if that's where you need to start.
Thanks.
Because some of those small things have very, very big impact.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to do it all at once. So 3 minutes, a minute each. This is the lightning round for the last question. What accessibility initiatives are you most excited about for 2021? And maybe this coincides with a question from the Q&A. If you could recommend one change to improve web accessibility in higher ed, what would it be? I need to pick someone. Charlie, go ahead.
All right, Charlie here from Rutgers. I would say that the initiatives that I'm most excited about for 2021 are, in order, our procurement process. So we're just about to unveil a new accessibility review for IT acquisitions, the Ally rollout, because of the power of that tool. And this is the first real chance that we have to interact directly with our faculty. And then the third and final one is a required training program for IT employees. So we're starting locally with our enterprise service delivery staff, which is the unit that we're built into, and then hopefully rolling it out to all 500 IT employees within our central office. And then in terms of the recommendation for one change to improve web accessibility in higher education, it's all about awareness. I think all of us deal with the challenges of being siloed. And a lot of those folks that are responsible for the upkeep of the individual websites just aren't aware of accessibility and the tools that are available to them in order to ensure it. So it's getting out there and just making sure that they know one, it's their responsibility, and two, that they have tools and support to help them do it.
All right, Pat, your 1 minute, go.
Okay, so I would say what we're most excited about is scaling up our efforts. So this was our sort of foundational year this past year. So we're really going to be scaling up the use of our enterprise tool, getting more sites into it, getting more users trained in it. It's going to be a year of growth for us. So that's a big one. Also, I agree with Charlie that training is just critical. We're going to continue to do training sessions, continue to try and find ways to get people engaged with our training program. And also the other big thing for us is that to make sure that we integrate accessibility into all of our processes so that it's not considered at the end, it's considered from the very beginning and throughout, with procurement, with software development, with project life cycles. Everything that it touches, web development, content development, it all needs to start at the beginning. So we're gonna, that'll be a big effort for us this year.
All right, Nate, you're up.
Sure. I love that last point you made, Pat, integrating accessibility into business process. And if you're looking to figure out where you spend the majority of your time to get the biggest bang for your buck, that is a very strategic area. That's one that we're going to continue to work on at MSU as well. I'd say the thing I'm most excited about is the launch of our new web audit team. It's going to be an independent team from ours that works on auditing web accessibility across our highest priority digital properties, regardless of whether they're websites, internal sites, whatever they are. And we're taking a play out of our old playbook here and hiring a lot of students to support that. So there'll be a strong coaching and mentorship process there to hopefully help usher in the next generation of web accessibility specialists and analysts and engineers that go off into all these great companies. So I'm excited about that. And the thing that I wish I could shout from the mountaintop would be you don't have to be perfect to get started. Always be working on this, always keep moving forward. It doesn't have to be perfect in order to make progress.
Great, thanks. So that takes us to time. And I know that we didn't get to all of the Q&As, but thank you all for participating. I did want to call out one thing from the Q&A because words and language are very important for all of us as we continue this work with accessibility and our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. One person called out the word evangelizing as conversion or colonization of peoples. So something for us to think about. So wanted to just kind of bring that up because words are important. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Nate, Pat, Charlie, and DQ, and AxCon.
Thank you, Cyndi.
All
I just wanted to add one quick thing. This is Travis from DQ. There were so many questions in the Q&A, and we appreciate the interaction. We're working on a strategy to try to answer those, whether it's through a blog post or to try, if you're not anonymous, to get you answers, because those will be archived. I apologize for anybody's question we didn't get to. It was really engaging, and there were just dozens and dozens. So we're working on that, and thank you so much for attending.